Welcome to Curtain Up, a new show that looks at current theater productions in the Bay Area and occasionally beyond. I'm Alan Stern, and this is my co-host, Greg Smith.
I'm thrilled to be here with you, Alan, and I just want to stay, I want to stay as well, but I want to say in the theater, a season is a lifetime and a lifetime is a season. Has nothing directly to do with what we're talking about today, but it's from All About Eve, and so we're using it.
Well, it does, because that's the quintessential movie about the theater.
About the theater.
And we both love it. So Greg and I have been friends for a long time, and one of the things that drew us together is our mutual love of the performing arts, especially theater, film, and television. We frequently find ourselves talking about theater law, the golden age of cinema, and the latest flop or smash on Broadway.
When our friends hear us going at it, they often tell us that we should have our own show. So I guess now we do, which is exciting. We want to mix in some glitz and glamour with history and social commentary. Theater reflects society. It comes from our civilization, and the glitz and glamour makes it all the more fun.
Well said. But you might ask, what qualifies us to sound off on the arts on public television? Well, I used to be a professional theater and movie critic for publications in Boston and Denver. And Greg, well, he simply has impeccable taste and judgment, as you can tell from his sports jacket that he's wearing.
Inspired by everything from Lauren Bacall in Applause to Sharon Tate in Valley of the Dolls, though that was a movie, and today we're talking about theater, but it's all connected. It all relates.
Now, where did you get that jacket?
This jacket's actually from Macy's, which features in a lot of movies.
Okay.
So that's appropriate. But yeah, so I love it. I love glitz.
I know you have many variations on that jacket, so maybe in future episodes we'll see more of that.
Absolutely. I started a little bit more conservative today, but I'm gonna, I'll let it go.
Great. Anyway, we're going to give this a try and appreciate your indulgence. And we're going to start with this pilot episode discussing a production we saw this past weekend in San Francisco.
It's called Joan Crawford Superstar. So right there, that tells you why we went to it. It's written and directed by Chris Chase. It was produced by Intentional Theatrics and is playing through May 18th at Theater 33 on Sutter Street in San Francisco.
Now, Greg, you and I have been to many San Francisco productions, but I don't think I've ever been to Theater 33 or even heard of it.
No, and I think there may have been another theater company there years ago, and I went to something, or we may have gone together, but it was a long time ago, and I can't really place it.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's in the heart of San Francisco, a block from Union Square, but it's in a little hole in the wall, although it seems that it has a comedy club in the basement and this smallish but nice theater upstairs.
And it has a bar downstairs, which is important too. And that's always important for theater people, it seems, and movie people.
Definitely for you.
For me.
Anyway, Joan Crawford Superstar is, as it sounds, a look at the fabled career of film actress Joan Crawford, who got her start in silent pictures in the 1920s and remained a huge star throughout the 1960s. In that decade, the 1960s, she was one of several older female stars who extended their careers by making horror movies. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which Crawford starred in with her rival Bette Davis in 1962, began this macabre trend, and it persisted through the end of the decade and slightly beyond. Now, I should note that both Crawford and Davis were only in their 50s when they made Baby Jane, but in the 1960s, this was considered way over the hill for an actress.
In the 1920s and 30s, Joan Crawford was the epitome of fashion and glamour. Again, why I'm wearing this jacket in tribute to her. And by the 1960s, even though she really wasn't that old by today's standards at all, and though she was no longer beautiful in the classical kind of way she had been when she was younger, she was still renowned for her staying power in the industry. She was still a force. I think people knew that, even though she hadn't had a hit movie for a while. And the movie industry is fickle, as we all know, and even today it is too. And she had her ups and downs, but she was still there, and she was still fighting for a place in the pantheon of the movie industry. Her best-known movies are Our Dancing Daughters, in which she played the epitome of the 1920s flapper. I'd love to get up and do a Charleston now, but I won't. Actually, my Charleston's not very good. Grand Hotel, which won the Oscar for Best Picture in 1932. with an amazing cast, including Greta Garbo and a lot of other great
John
stars.
Barrymore.
John Barrymore.
Several Barrymores.
Several Barrymores. Amazing cast. The Women, which of course is a fantastic film, all-female cast. Norma Shear, her arch rival at one time at MGM, is in it. Rosalind Russell, Joan Fontaine, just an amazing cast. One of whom we're not crazy about, but we're not going to talk about that. We like most of them. Mildred Pierce, for which she earned the only Academy Award she was ever awarded, and which features prominently in the plot of the play. And I just want to say on a personal note, a movie that I saw as a kid, and I didn't know why it spoke to me, I didn't know why she spoke to me, but she did, and it influenced my life.
Yeah.
We can talk more about that later on, too.
She played a kind of like a lower middle class housewife who, gets rid of her husband because he's not supporting the family,
Deadbeat.
and she starts a line of she starts baking pies, and that turns into a series of restaurants that she opens in L.A., and she becomes extremely successful. But it's film noir because it has an aspect of murder to it.
Right. Extremely successful in her professional life, but challenged in her personal life. And of course that comes home to haunt her. But absolutely. And you know what I love about that movie too? I mean, it was a little bit transgressive for the time, I think, because she's such a strong woman at a time when that was not celebrated as an American archetype. And maybe that's why it spoke to me too. I don't know. I think that was part of it. But also it's all about class in America too, because right, she's lower middle class. The movie focuses on her ambitions, the ambitions of her daughter, the lack of ambition of her husband, the ambitions of some other people, somebody with whom she falls in love who's kind of moving in the other direction from the old aristocracy, but falling into harder times, but still has a fancy name. It's just got everything, and it says so much about America in the middle of the 20th century.
When she won the Oscar, it was a personal triumph for her because she had been let go from MGM Studios after being one of their leading stars for many years. And also in the late 30s, she had been declared box office poison by the theater owners who said that her movies were consistently losing money. So she didn't work for a couple of years, and then she got a new contract with Warner Brothers. And Mildred Pierce was the first movie that they put her into.
And it was a spectacular success in every way, including getting her, at long last, an Oscar nomination. Because you're right, MGM had never campaigned for her to have an Oscar nomination when she was there. She felt eclipsed by Norma Shear, with whom she co-starred in The Women, who was the grande dame, the first lady of MGM, and was married to, as Joan famously said, the boss, because she'd been married to Irving Thalberg, who was a producer at MGM, Norma Shear, not Joan. So Joan had a bit of a chip on her shoulder about that as well, which fits with Mildred Pierce, with the whole plot of Mildred Pierce kind of perfectly. But also back to the idea of Joan, as she was getting older, although she wasn't even really that old, she was in her 40s then, in the 1940s, but as she was getting a bit older and things were changing, she stayed in there. You know, other stars who faded at MGM faded. Norma Shear, her career just kind of went away in the early 40s. Greta Garbo, Jeanette MacDonald, others didn't really transition to another studio, didn't really keep their careers going. Joan did. She fought for it, and she got it with her contract at Warner Brothers.
And she like Madonna, she kind of reinvented herself every few years.
And took on different types of roles. For instance, she also did a little bit later on the Western Johnny Guitar, one of the most, a movie that has a huge cult following in France, interestingly, and a bit of a cult following here. There's actually a shoe store in Paris, I'm not sure if it's still there, but called Johnny Guitar. So there at least was, and it's a shoe store, and I'm not exactly sure why they picked the name for a shoe store, but it reflects this fascination with Joan Crawford that the French have. But it was a Western. She's extremely tough, and as you would expect in a Western, she's playing kind of a almost quintessential male role as a woman in this great Western. And then she kept going on through other films, and then made it to Baby Jane with her, by then, new arch rival or other arch rival, Bette Davis, which made it all the more interesting too.
And Baby Jane, was made on a shoestring budget. I think they each got maybe $25,000 plus a share of the profits if it was a hit, but nobody expected it to be a hit, and it was a huge box office success. So
amazing.
Anyway, let's get back to the play.
Yes.
Although this history that we just went through is really, it informs what happens in the play, and I must say that the playwright Chris Chase, I think his name is.
I think so.
Yes. He's obviously very knowledgeable about all the Joan Crawford history and lore. Now the play has an interesting structure. It alternates scenes between the young Joan Crawford and the mature Joan Crawford, who are played by two different actresses. And in effect, it traces two timelines, one moving forward from the 1920s when Joan was a flapper who danced the Charleston a lot, and the other moving backward from the 1970s until the two Joan Crawfords meet in the middle when she wins her Academy Award for Best Actress in 1946.
For the movie Mildred Pierce, made in 1945, right? But at the Oscars that year. No, it's really interesting how they do that. So it's not just a straight kind of linear depiction of Crawford's life or career. It actually makes it very, very interesting the way these two threads kind of come together. The rest of the cast play interviewers and three of the most important men in Joan's life. Louis B. Mayer, who ran MGM Studios in the 1930s and 1940s, and whom Joan famously described as a beautiful man in an interview, parts of which are featured in the play, though not that line about him. Anyway, other people didn't think he was a beautiful man in quite the same way, so it depends on who you ask. But he was certainly an important man. Clark Gable is also played in this, MGM's most important male star and a frequent co-star and lover of Joan Crawford. And Billy Haynes, a closeted silent film star and was a pretty big film star, who eventually left acting to become a successful interior decorator and was one of Crawford's closest friends.
So, Greg, what did you think of the play overall?
I loved it. I mean, I really did. Of course, I would probably love almost anything that depicted things from Joan Crawford's life. I will admit that, again, because she's had this influence on me ever since I was a kid watching Mildred Pierce. Which I just remember the trains going by in Mildred Pierce and the travel, and which just sort of represented, I think, the changes in her life, and it just sucked me in. But beyond that, I mean, that being said, I think the play was really good, really clever. The way that they did have these two threads that come together, and you're not really sure how they're going to come together until the end of the play, but I think they do pretty successfully. So I really enjoyed it. It kept me interested.
I mean, I'll agree with you. I enjoyed it too. I wouldn't say I loved it or I thought it was a perfect play, but the playwright Chris Chase really knows his stuff. Now, I did find that a lot of the dialogue is very speechy. I mean, it's like the characters are giving monologues or speeches about what they think rather than interacting in a more theatrical way. And it really does get into the minutia of Joan Crawford's career, and for people who are not as devoted to Crawford Abelia as you and I are, it might start to get a little bit tedious. But I enjoyed it, and I thought the two actresses were very good.
Very good.
Especially the younger Joan Crawford, Isabel de Grandi.
Yes.
She was made up to look quite a bit like Joan Crawford did in the 20s and 30s. And I thought she was a sensational actress.
I did too, and I thought she brought the energy that Joan had, that you can see in Joan's early movies, and in clips of her being interviewed in the 20s and 30s, and clips you see of her at social events in Hollywood, and just doing things in life. She had an incredible energy, and I think she was known for that, for just being kind of unstoppable, even to the point where she would get home and scrub the floors and clean her house. But that kind of gets into a whole nother part of Crawford's life too, and the way that's been depicted. But she was supposed to be just ferociously energetic, and I think she gets that, and charming, and friendly, and enthusiastic about life too.
Yeah.
You know, none of later on, Joan, in interviews that you can see with her, bitterness crept into her life, as it probably does to all of our lives eventually. Hope it doesn't, but you know, it can. She lost, of course, she was older too later on, and so she lost a bit of that energy. But Isabel de Grande really captured that. I think that spirit of Joan when she was young.
And one of the amazing things is that this is her first professional job.
And she was great.
She apparently she just graduated with a degree in theater from Emerson College in Boston.
Great theater school.
And this is the first show she's done out of college, and she was fantastic.
She was fantastic. She was very poised, and as you said, it was maybe a bit speechy, but there was a lot of dialogue. I mean, she had to master a lot and remember it, and I just thought she was perfect with it, and great cadence, and really engaging. She was terrific. She was terrific.
And the actress who played the older Joan Crawford,
Donna Turner.
Donna Turner. Yes, she was also very good. You know, I don't think she resembled Joan Crawford, the real Joan Crawford, as much, but she had that kind of honeyed tone of voice that Crawford developed as she got older, so I thought that was good.
You know what? I think younger. It's an artifice, right? That honeyed tone and the way Joan presented herself. There was an artificiality about it later on, because by that point she had created this image of herself and for herself. Sometimes with the help of MGM and Warner Brothers, sometimes against the, going against the grain at those studios and others, but she'd created it nonetheless. And I think Joan later on in life was really interested in preserving that image. And you get that. That's part of the way that she acted and looked and spoke. Whereas the younger Joan didn't seem to be concerned about that. She was just kind of going through life, taking opportunities, having fun with them, concerned about her career, wanting to build her career, but there was just a freshness there, and that was gone with the older Joan, both the way the actress portrayed her and I think as Joan was in real life. So it was pretty accurate.
Now, I do have one criticism. I said that, it follows two timelines that, one that begins in the 20s, the other that goes backward from the 70s. And when they meet in the middle, like when she wins the Oscar for Mildred Pierce, they should be similar because the younger Joan Crawford matures, whereas the older Joan Crawford regresses. And so by the time we're at this point where she wins the Oscar, and the scene features both actresses,
which is kind of brilliant.
They should be fairly similar to each other, and then they diverge from there. And I don't think the director quite got that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It still worked for me, but it was almost as if two different people were meeting.
Right.
Whereas, you'd expect it to be the same person, right? Although I suppose if you go back and meet your younger self, not that you really can, except maybe just seeing pictures of yourself or reliving things, maybe do people feel like, would they feel like two different people? In a way, yes, but in a way not.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
One other thing I really did enjoy, though, and I think we've already touched on this a bit, the writer, who's also the director, right? The writer and, Chris Chase is the writer, director, and does the costumes and the props. Wow. Pretty talented. And they had some great costumes, and really great costumes. But he worked in a lot of famous snippets of interviews, including Joan Crawford at Town Hall in New York, very famous, and that actually the drag star Lip Synca did a whole play based on, which is kind of fun. Worked in some other interviews and things that are, and some famous quotes and scenes, and I love that because it kind of grounded it in a way, which was nice. The rest of the cast too, I think, was very good. I mean, the focus is on the two Joans.
Right.
But the other cast, I think, did a really fine job of supporting them.
I would be, less enthused than you about the supporting cast. I thought the actor who played Louis B. Mayer was very good. His Richard Wenzel.
I thought he
The
was
ones
too.
who played Clark Gable and Billy Haynes, they were okay, but far below the level of like an Isabel DeGrande.
Yeah, but they were good. They were good, I would say too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. And again, they're supporting. I mean, so much of the focus is on Joan herself. But I wouldn't disagree. But I think they added to the production, I think, overall.
Right.
So.
And I should also mention that in the lobby of the theater is a lot of Crawford memorabilia, photos, postcards, posters
Really
from her
fun.
productions, caricatures, and you can see all the different phases of glamour that she went through from the 1920s up until the 60s.
Which is fun. Which again reflects the evolution of Hollywood during that period, and in some ways the evolution of the United States. I mean, certainly in terms of tastes and even values. It's interesting. It's fun. So I think that was pretty enjoyable.
Yeah. So what would you say the bottom line is on Joan Crawford Superstar?
I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I'd recommend it. And I'm trying to think. You and I do know a lot about Joan already. We're Joan aficionados. So we recognized a lot of the things that were happening. We recognized the other characters, references that they made. And I'm trying to think, if I didn't know as much about Joan Crawford and went to that play, I think I would still really enjoy it, and I think I would learn about her. Would it be harder to follow what's going on? Maybe, but I think you would still come away learning something about Joan.
Well, I can think of friends we have that would really enjoy it, and other friends who would just fall asleep. Or, well, you can't leave an intermission because
There's no
it's
intermission.
one act. It's 80 minutes without intermission. And I should mention that it is currently playing through May 18th. So if what we said interests you, please make sure, go see it.
And let me just say, it's one act with no intermission, but it does go pretty quickly, too. Sometimes people can think, what if I have to go to the restroom? Is that going to be? But probably go before. But always a good idea with that, that kind of situation. But it works. It works, and it goes pretty fast. It flows, and when it was over, I thought, well, I could have used some more. Again, I'm a Crawford fan, but loved it.
You're a glutton for Crawford.
Glutton for Crawford.
Yep. So I think that wraps up our first episode. So we hope to see you next month when we talk about a world premiere musical that is taking place in Mountain View. And until then, take care.
We're excited. Thank you.